Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gooey's Dungeon Dive, the podcast where I, Gooey, rank every dungeon in The Legend of Zelda. And this week we're having a little side quest as we check out the Color Dungeon from Link's Awakening, which was, of course, added in the Link's Awakening DX version for the Game Boy Color, and has carried over to the Switch version of the game. Now is as good of a time as any in this run through, because the main hint for finding the dungeon is actually found after using the Pegasus boots to knock down a book off the highest shelf in the library in Mabe Village. And it gives you a little hint on how to move some gravestones in the cemetery, which will open up the entrance to the Color Dungeon. Now I want to kind of get it out there right away in terms of layout and navigation. The Color Dungeon, it's somewhat straightforward of a dungeon compared to the rest of Link's Awakening. I think it's somewhat comparable to the original Legend of Zelda in that sense, and that makes a lot of sense for this because a lot of Link's Awakening is trying to evoke that in some ways, being kind of a more, I don't know if you'd call it 8-bit screen-to-screen game. But it's especially here in this dungeon that it has that feeling. Probably helps that the dungeon theme is the dungeon theme from the original Legend of Zelda, but it's probably also because it was inserted into the DX version of the game after the original version was already out. So it can't really give you much that will alter the gameplay or anything too drastically. Like a dungeon item or something like that, because the game's not built around it. You know, this is just a little bonus, essentially. And I think it works pretty well in that regard. I guess I should also mention that its layout, the shape of it, sort of does kind of look like the Death Mountain level in the original Legend of Zelda's second quest, which I think is supposed to sort of look like Ganon's head. But anyway, that's kind of a neat little thing here. I guess it also kind of looks like a tunic, which will make more sense later. But obviously, the main thing this dungeon is built around, the whole concept of it, is to show off the color in the original Game Boy Color when that came out. And so we obviously have a lot of puzzles based around color. Although I will say the Switch remake, they clearly and smartly considered colorblind players. Pretty much all the puzzles are non-dependent on just being able to recognize the color differences. They also added shapes to everything. So now, like, each color has a shape associated with it, so you can still identify them all. And that's obviously, I think that was kind of necessary to do. So shout out to them for that. But yeah, you know, you've got these puzzles where you hit these switches to change their color and to change the color of the switches around them. And they're built around, like, trying to get the colors to all match. You have these other, like, orb monsters that have colors associated with them, and they have to be thrown into, like, their specific matching color hole. They're pretty cute, especially considering that for their time and the context of the original version. They don't really excite me that much anymore, and I think that especially is kind of showed off more in the modern version of the game. Again, it's cute and novel, and it does kind of stand out. But yeah, in, like, the Switch version, it does sort of, the novelty, I think, just shines out a lot more in the original version. It's easier kind of for me to put my head in the context of that game, but it's not really a big deal either way. I still think it's fine, and it's fun, it's cute. But yeah, other than that, the navigation, like I said, it's pretty basic. You know, you got your map and compass and your stone beak that just kind of gives you the same hint about the colors mostly. And, you know, you go around and you collect some keys and open doors. There's not, like, different levels that you travel to. You don't go on underground passageways. So it really feels like a earlier Zelda dungeon in that sense, before they even get more complex in the original. One thing that really stands out to me as neat still in this dungeon is it has, like, 3 bosses pretty much. There's, like, 2 sort of mini bosses and a final boss. One of them is like this giant buzz blob, and you have to sprinkle magic powder on it so we get some use out of the magic powder, and it turns it into this giant Zol instead, and then it's vulnerable and you can attack it. You know, it's a pretty neat little fight. And then you've got this giant stone golem called Avalanche, I think, who like stomps around and makes boulders fall at you, and he looks kind of like a big stone Hynix, I guess. And you know, it's about dodging the boulders and dodging when he slams on the ground. Fun fights, I'd say. Nice little fights. But the final boss is a giant hard hat beetle that now changes colors. And this guy, as you hit the spot on his back, it slowly changes color all the way to red, and that's when you can beat him. And as he gets further and more damaged, he starts throwing more at you, and you gotta dodge it and try to keep up with the color changing, because he will change back to his original color. It's very easy in the Switch version, whereas like in the original I felt like he changed very fast, and it was actually kind of annoying because he had certain text associated with whatever level of color he was at, and it would reset and you get the text again. Really annoying. But in the Switch version, it's actually maybe way too easy. I don't know. Actually, they're all pretty simple, but they're fun. Like, again, this is a little bonus side challenge, so I'm not like nitpicking it too hard. I think these are all fun little side bosses to fight and everything. After all said and done, we go and we meet a fairy in the final chamber who offers us the choice between having power or protection, and we get a nice color tunic depending on our choice. Blue gives us the ability to take more damage, and red makes our sword do more damage, so it's a nice little treat. A nice little reward for a nice little side dungeon. Of course, now we have to rank it, and I'm actually re-recording the ending because I wasn't happy with it before where I put it. I've just been all over the place. I don't think this is necessarily breaking any new ground, like I mentioned before. I do like it, but it serves its purpose really well as a bonus, an optional dungeon added later in that context. You know, that being said though, it's not really one of my favorites in this game, that is. I would actually put it kind of mixed in with the Legend of Zelda dungeons that I have more towards the bottom. But even, again, that is not necessarily a diss. Some people who've listened to the older ones know how I feel about some of those, and I really like them. There's a little bit more going on here than a lot of them. Still, though, there's, you know, different routes you can kind of go down. There's different wings of the dungeon, kind of like some of the Legend of Zelda ones, you know, with going to get the Nightmare Key, and there's also this whole added addition of like all these bosses, these mini bosses, which I think are really cool. I do like it a little bit less than Bottle Grotto. And the snake and the lizard were some standout dungeons for me in the Legend of Zelda. Now, I'll probably stop there because I think the eagle, it's a great opening for the game and everything, but it is very basic. I could probably bump up Three Eye Rock Palace. I actually kind of like that place, but I can't do that now, of course. So, with that being said, I think I will keep it here, just below the snake and the lizard. It's nice to show this some props too. And that being said, this is still a great side bonus dungeon. Getting the extra stuff with the extra tunic is awesome. The color puzzles are novel, again, not my favorite. I do like the little Stalfos that guard the entrance, Gar and Dion. Shout out to them. Forgot to mention them, but other than that, you know, it's solid to me. It's good, but you know, it is what it is. It's almost not fair to compare it to some of the other dungeons in the game. And with that, we're at the end here of the episode. thanks again for watching. Appreciate everyone who's been following along. We've got a lot of great people leaving comments, and I really appreciate it. I've been really struck lately by how knowledgeable so many of the people who comment are, and obviously significantly more knowledgeable on this stuff than I actually am. I'm just kind of a casual fan trying to articulate what I like about these games, and there's some serious people who have some nice knowledge there, and I appreciate all of the stuff you've been sharing, while also not like being rude about the fact that I'm not like a game design expert or anything. But you all should know that you all should probably have your own version of this show where you share some of this great knowledge that you all have. Anyway, thanks to everyone who's been watching, and we're going to be back on course next week with Angler's Tunnel, so we'll see you then.